Good morning and welcome to the Liverpool Daily News. I think you can guess what will be on the agenda today. I'm joined by Bocsak to discuss it. It's the Arsenal game and the fallout from that in terms of the injuries and what the result means for Liverpool's season. It could be a pretty grim one, so please do get in the comments and talk to us. Tell us what you think. It'll help us get through the morning if we can dive into some discussions with all of you. We always enjoy that, even if we didn't enjoy the game so much. I mean, it was an entertaining one, wasn't it, Ben? But what did you make of it on the whole?
Yeah, it was an entertaining game. I think you have to say, all credit to Arsenal. They made it really exciting. Martinelli and Saka looked very bright and promising. And yeah, I think you can't help but be excited by this Arsenal team as a neutral. Obviously, from a Liverpool perspective, it was disappointing, but um, trying to be objective about the game, this Arsenal team is very exciting, and I think it's a good example for Liverpool to follow. The juxtaposition for me between the two sides in terms of Liverpool being one of the oldest in the league and Arsenal being one of the youngest. You have to give credit to the work Mikel Arteta has done, because that wasn't always the case. I mean, when he got there, Arsenal wasn't necessarily such a youthful side, and they needed a big rebuild. And I think Liverpool are certainly approaching that moment when they need a similar rebuild, and sort of they need to rejuvenate the side with more youngsters. And I think Arsenal are probably a good example to follow.
Yeah, Bruce agrees with you. He says the difference between the old and the young was clear to see. I think, yeah, that did drive the point home, but I think it's probably one of many problems Liverpool are facing at the moment. It's not all about the aging squad, but yeah, in a game like that, the contrast was particularly marked, and I suppose it's frustrating because as recently as 3-4 months ago, you'd be saying Liverpool might be looking to poach some of these young players. I mean, Klopp's talked about Martinelli for a long time. He's clearly a big fan. Liverpool have been linked with Saka on and off. But I mean, looking at where the two teams are now, and even looking at Liverpool's top four prospects, you'd have to say it doesn't look like these are players who are going to be on the market for Liverpool anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think those rumors were always optimistic. I mean, let's be honest, Arsenal are a big club and they have a lot of financial power, so they were never going to let go of their top stars. And I think, yeah, it was just never going to happen. I mean, Arsenal may have been a selling club in the past, but there's not that many recent examples. I mean, Aubameyang left, but he wasn't really considered as a starter or as a key player by the time he did leave. So, yeah, for me, I think Arsenal just are now. I think not just Arsenal. I think every Premier League club now will demand extortionate money for their prized assets. You saw Brighton holding out for Cucurella for a long time, and yeah, I think that's just the case now with every club. It's becoming increasingly more difficult to get their star players. I mean, City had to play up over 100 million for Jack Grealish, and I wouldn't say he's even on par with the potential that Martinelli or Saka has.
That's true. Perhaps clubs do need to sort of cast the net wider now to find sort of their own Martinellis, their own Sakas without paying through the nose for them. But I suppose Liverpool would say Luis Diaz was one of the ones they did that with in recent times. He's been a real bright spot, particularly this season where he's probably been the best performer by quite some distance, I would say. But of course, he had to come off with an injury, which Klopp has said doesn't look good. Just how damaging is that to the season?
Um, I would say it's a concern. Diaz has been a bright spot, but I don't think he's irreplaceable. I don't think he's quite reached Sadio Mane status or level. Really, I think Diaz has been promising in terms of progressing the ball and looking good in terms of his dribbling, but I think in terms of his end product, I think he's still missing something, and so therefore, I don't think he's necessarily as much of a loss as people are making out to be. I think Jota did well when he came on for him. I don't think in that particular Arsenal game, that I don't think it ruined the dimension of the game. I think Liverpool pretty much very similar after Diaz came off than they were before, and I think the only concern really is that Liverpool's depth it just seems to be getting worse and worse. I mean, last season we were talking about how good Liverpool's squad were and how there's a player or two in every position. Now that's not the case, and I think that's the concern really because it's fine to miss Diaz for a couple of months, but then if you lose Jota, Firmino or Salah or any of those up front attacking options, then you start to be concerned.
Yeah, I mean Jota shifted across to the left, didn't he? And then Firmino came on, and like you say, it did still look decent. But do you think that that's probably it for the 4-4-2 or the 4-2-3-1 for the time being, or whatever you want to call it? Do you think having one fewer attacker means that that's less plausible now, or do you reckon Klopp's going to keep persisting?
It's an interesting question. I don't think the 4-4-2 was necessarily that impressive. I think it certainly shored up Liverpool. Liverpool would have looked, I think, a lot worse if they went with the 4-3-3 against Arsenal. And I think, therefore, I think Klopp is going to stick with it. I think he's still got enough profiles to play in those positions. Jota can do the left. Firmino can slot into the Jota role and so forth. So I think he'll still go with it.
Yeah, and Firmino, I suppose, if we're looking for positives, he's another one. He's been in a rich vein of form recently, and the finish against Arsenal was well, you'd have to call it uncharacteristic, at least over the last 2-3 seasons. It was a clinical finish, one that you wouldn't necessarily have backed him to score that, in recent times. So I suppose that's an encouraging sign if he's back to somewhere close to his best.
I mean, to be in all fairness to him, I think he's been really good in terms of his being clinical for Liverpool. Last season, he was averaging almost a goal per game per 90 minutes. So let's give Firmino some credit. I think he's been pretty prolific. Maybe not in the season before that or the season before that, but the last sort of year and a half, I think he's really improved that side of his game, and he has become a bit of a clinical machine. I mean, I remember him coming on against Porto and getting some good finishes, and that was not often the case. I think last season coming off the bench. So yeah, I think that is really promising, and it also gives Liverpool a bit of a conundrum because he is getting on in years, and he does have that contract looming coming to the end almost. Definitely next season by the end of the season. So it does leave an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, we have some help from the comments in helping us to find the positives as well. So if Firmino is one of them, Joe says Nunez was class two. So that's certainly something we can talk about for a little while. He got himself a goal, I think, probably a much needed goal. What did you make of his all round performance?
I think, I mean, he did get the goal, but other than that, I don't think he was very involved in the game, and I think that wasn't necessarily his fault. It was just Liverpool not dominating. Uh, he's making good runs, which is encouraging, but I think Liverpool still need to adjust to playing with a number 9 and getting sort of used to his movements and the way he attacks the box. So I think it is still a work in progress.
Yeah, I think we were all adamant that this wouldn't be and shouldn't be allowed to be a transition season. And if it is a transition season, then that is, that's an indictment of the business that's been done. Liverpool shouldn't have written off a whole season, and of course that wouldn't have been the plan. But I think, at this point, with the points that we've got on the board so far, maybe you do need to start looking at it more in that way. And Nunez is certainly one who's going to take time to adjust because the team are adjusting around him as much as the other way around. So that's certainly maybe a mitigating factor, even if it's a hugely frustrating one for us as fans. The other negative to come out of the game, which we have to mention briefly, is Trent Alexander-Arnold. Of course, we don't know the extent of that one yet either. Both players are said to be awaiting scans, so hopefully we'll know more soon and we'll bring it to you when we do. But assuming that's at least a couple of weeks or something, Ben, how does that affect things moving forward?
I think he'll be a huge loss. I mean, it's a bit of a catch-22 because defensively he hasn't really been great, but offensively, I think Liverpool suffered without his creativity in the second half for sure. And I think he will be missed sorely. And now will be the time when Liverpool really find out just how much they rely on Trent Alexander-Arnold. I mean, if you look at the underlying numbers for Liverpool, sort of putting balls into the box or building attacks, it's all been down the right flank even this season. And I think that's going to be something that Liverpool will feel greatly without him.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, and like you say, maybe there'll be a short-term little boost in terms of maybe the defence shores up a little bit. I thought Gomez, for the most part, did quite well when he came on. There was certainly one time where Martinelli gave him the runaround in exactly the same way as Trent, but on the whole, I thought he did quite well on that side of the game. But like you say, the whole way the system is built is kind of reliant on Trent as one of the main playmakers. Alistair says Klopp needs to create the team around. I think he's talking about Nunez there in the same way that City does, presumably with Haaland. So yeah, maybe that's one of the many problems. But as Bruce says, I think our problems are more than just formation. We seem to be suffering from a lot of issues. So, all of these individual things keep happening. There's injuries. There's the age, which we alluded to earlier, with the players getting older. But nothing on its own seems to explain why this Liverpool team has gone from nearly winning the quadruple to this so quickly. And I'm not even going to ask you what it is, Ben, because I think you'll agree that it's a multitude of problems which have only really got worse with the injuries. But I suppose if you could sort of change one thing about Liverpool now, what do you reckon would be that?
I mean, I would change the priorities, right? We went into the season thinking, right, we missed out on the Champions League, we missed out on the Premier League. Let's win both of those. I think the priority now becomes just looking at the reality of the situation. We've got an aging squad that's underperforming. The priority should be at least the Champions League, and it's more at boardroom level that I think things need to change. I think Liverpool need to actually invest money. I mean, Arsenal are a perfect example of that. They spent around 300 million on some of their young talent, and they seem to be shining through. And I think that's what Liverpool need to do. They need to make sure they get the top four and start building a team around the future. And that might mean taking a step back now, but it could mean taking 2 steps forward in the future in a season's time potentially. So I think that's what needs to happen now, is to change the priority and to sort of concentrate on the future and rebuilding the team and having a transitional season, as you would say.
Yeah, it's a vicious circle because if the worst happens and Liverpool do miss out on the top four, then attracting that top talent is harder. But I suppose in that sense, you'd look at Arsenal as maybe something of an encouragement, in the sense that they haven't been in the Champions League regularly over recent seasons, and they've still been able to put together a squad which, as we saw, is very talented under a very talented manager. So yeah, I think there's still scope for that rebuild, even if it means someone like a Bellingham is going to be potentially consigned to a pipe dream if Liverpool can't make top four. And I suppose that's as good a question as any to end on, Ben. The top four chances. I mean, it's been put to us in the comments here. He says, "I believe we will make top four. What about you guys?" I mean, I'll give it to you first, and then I'll answer as well. I won't shy away from it. But what do you reckon?
I mean, of course, Liverpool can still make the top four. I mean, they have world-class players, and as this form is temporary, class is permanent, and there's still 30 games after the season to go. So it's a possibility, and Liverpool just need to go on a good run of form. I mean, I think we haven't got to as bad of a stage as we were without centre backs during the second half of 2 seasons ago. I think it was 2020, 21. So it hasn't got to quite that bad of a stage. And there's a World Cup coming up where the likes of Mohamed Salah, Luis Diaz, potentially even Trent Alexander-Arnold, who knows if he's going to make it to that World Cup squad, are all going to get rest and spend some time in Melbourne, in the AXA training centre now, I should say, and sort of work on the deficiencies in Liverpool system there. And I think that's a really good opportunity to, get things together and adapt and to evolve under Klopp, and that gives me optimism. I think that World Cup might be a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree. I'll be optimistic. It'll probably be fourth if it is going to be the top four. I can't see Liverpool getting too much higher. I think Arsenal and Manchester City at this point are all but out of sight. Third place, maybe third is up for grabs, but I mean Chelsea have made a shrewd appointment in Graham Potter. They're starting to pick up form, so Liverpool will have to turn around sooner rather than later if they're to be caught. But like you say, if they're at least in touch with the top four come the World Cup, then maybe that'll be the reset that's needed. So yeah, there's still some reasons to be optimistic, even if it doesn't hugely feel like it after yesterday. But equally, plenty of problems that need solving very quickly. We'll be discussing some potential solutions and trying to diagnose the potential problems over on Liverpool.com today and in the future. So be sure to check out all of our work over there. We'll be discussing it in depth on Blood Red as well. So check us out on YouTube. We'll be bringing you content all throughout the day, and we'll be back here tomorrow morning for another daily news. For now, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you all very soon.